In this video, we'll give you our top reactions to Week 18, along with an early look at Super Wildcard Weekend. Yes, that is a thing. The NFL calls it that. I'll roll with it. I'm Jim Coventry, joined with Anthony Servino, and we are with RotoWire. Well, Anthony, the story has to start where everybody had their anticipation. Everybody was amped up for that Vikings and Lions battle for the number 1 seed. The scoring in the Lions games had been furious for 4 weeks. They had 3 games that were like over 65 points. The Bears game was 51 points. The Vikings, their games weren't quite that high, but they were certainly putting points up. And the Lions decimated on defense. We were expecting all kinds of fireworks. And then only the Lions had some. Nothing for the Vikings. What happened?
It just looked like the Vikings didn't belong in that game. It was a playoff atmosphere. There was a lot of build up to it. And I do think the Lions, playoff type mindset showed up, and the Vikings, maybe, they've had a great season. They've won a lot of games, but it's a different ball game when you're playing for something like the number 1 seed. And Sam Darnold, I think you said it last night, he kind of turned back into a pumpkin. But my bigger concern was in those early sequences. There were 2 straight sequences where the Vikings had the ball inside the 10. I think they ran the ball once, and I think that was a mistake.
So I know the Vikings deserve the talk, and the Lions deserve the talk, and we're going to get to them. But the story here right now is kind of the Vikings. And Anthony, I don't know if it was you and I talking last week or somebody else, but the talk was before this game, how do the Vikings not bring back Sam Darnold? At that point, they had won all these games. They were angling to be the 1 seed. It was a great story. I think this game could change that narrative. Now, if the Vikings have this big playoff run, it'll all be forgotten. But if they're quickly out of the playoffs, one, maybe a second game, and they're out, all of a sudden, going into the season, Anthony, I said this about Sam Darnold. I said he couldn't be in a better situation. Good offensive line, a play caller that schemes players open. He has Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. He'd eventually get Hawkinson. He had Aaron Jones. Everything around him was great. The infrastructure was perfect. And Sam Darnold was making plays. And for a while, look, when he was under some pressure, he was making things happen. And so he looked like he actually was even elevating the circumstance. But when it got real, when it became a high stakes game, the fact he didn't show up, I don't know if it's a one-off. I have legitimate concerns about him. And I know it's, again, small sample size sport, but I thought everything needed to be perfect around Darnold in the first place. And I don't think we could count on everything always being perfect around you. And I think that's fundamentally the problem. I think he's somebody that can help your team, but he can't raise your team.
Right, but they still won, 14 games?
Oh, yeah.
And he put up big numbers.
Mm-hmm.
My concern, because I think he's done enough to at least get 1 more year, what's their other option? You turn to J.J. McCarthy, and then what? Then you really don't know what you have. He didn't really throw it a ton in Michigan. So you could potentially go from a 14-win team to an 8-win team.
I get that. We don't know what J.J. McCarthy is. We know this. The Vikings invested a first-round pick in him.
Yeah.
And they saw whatever they saw in OTAs before he had hurt his knee. They saw whatever they thought he was. And Greg Cosell, NFL Films, always thought McCarthy was a bit of a project, needed a year or so to be ready. But ultimately, the NFL kind of works. So you draft a quarterback, you got to take your chance. But I get what you're saying. If they believe they're in a Super Bowl window and McCarthy's not yet ready, they probably would be better off going in for 1 year with Darnold, because you're right. What's the alternative? That's always a big question in the NFL. If you got a quarterback, you have nothing, and they don't grow on trees. You can't just say, okay, well, we're going to find somebody. You're right. They lucked out that Darnold played as well as he did, but the goal is the Super Bowl. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm just interested in that. Now, the other thing was, I thought, all right, so on the first couple drives, Darnold took that 17-yard sack. That was crushing. There was a holding penalty, and they were moving the ball in that first drive before the holding penalty. So it started out a couple of things sabotaged them. But I don't think Kevin O'Connell showed up for this game. Kevin O'Connell is the master at scheming people open. And the TV crew wanted to talk about the corner and how Amick Robertson and how he was all over Justin Jefferson and he was shutting down Jefferson. Seriously, Amick Robertson cannot shut down Justin Jefferson. Throws were behind Jefferson. Our Darnold was way off on his placement. If O'Connell had gone into this game knowing the Lions had no choice but to blitz the house because they knew their corners couldn't hold up. All O'Connell had to do is stack his receivers, bunch them, free releases. They would have shredded them on quick throws. O'Connell did not show up with a game plan that could win in this contest. He's been a great coach for a while, but I don't think he showed up. Was there anything to that?
I agree, and I think it was us last week talking about his play calling. I brought up that play when they had to, try to close the game out, and it was a play action pass to the foot. Like he was on fire play calling all year. I did not like what they put on the field last night. That game, until Gibbs blew it open in the third quarter or late in the third, whenever it was. I don't know. You have Aaron Jones. You have Cam Akers. Why didn't they run? That's my biggest question. Sam Darnold was struggling. They were pressuring him every time he dropped back. Why didn't they run the ball more? Early this season, the screen plays to Aaron Jones were phenomenal. Where was that?
Right. Anything to mitigate that blitz. After one drive, maybe two drives, they could have realized right away, if they didn't know, this is what they're doing. And like I said, you said screens. Yes, screen passes will beat a blitz. Stacking your receivers. You put three of them in a bunch and you drop one back. Well, people are blitzing. You've got like nobody to pick up. If one of those guys breaks a tackle, they're gone. And Jefferson could do that all day long. Addison could do that quite a bit. And it was just, like I said, it was just a poor reaction or lack of reaction. O'Connell did not react to what was clear and obvious in front of him, and he never gave his team a chance to compete. And so, but here's the good news. He screwed up. O'Connell screwed up. He let everybody down. But that wasn't a playoff game. They're in the playoffs. Now they're the 5th seed. Is that optimal? No. They play the Rams, so that we'll talk about that maybe later. But we definitely will mention that at some point. But the point is, if he learns from that, maybe they could fix this. Do you think that's something where O'Connell can maybe turn around and say, okay, we got to stick to what we do. We make adjustments. We get people open. We were able to compete. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I like that you brought up that this wasn't the playoff game. They are going to play next week. It's almost like they got their mulligan. Like this was the mulligan game. And now Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold, this team can go back and say, okay, how do we not repeat what happened against the Lions? And if you watched, it was fun. After the game, Dan Campbell said, hey, we might see you in 2 weeks.
Right? And that's a strong probability.
I think he's anticipating that.
And if they play that game, O'Connell will benefit from his screw-ups because, look, the Lions threw their one ace at them. They will have time to prepare firsthand with real game film of, oh, this is what they're going to do. This is what we're going to do. And at that point, what we expected yesterday, this high-scoring game, that all of a sudden is back in play. If they play this again, that same result is not happening. It is not Sam Darnold running for his life. There will be answers. O'Connell is an excellent football coach who had a really, really bad day. Lions, they deserve the credit. They got the big win. Anthony, the biggest thing I'll say about the Lions, and this is the thing that we have to quantify for the NFC playoffs. We know that defense is battered and beaten up, and we've seen them get shredded by multiple teams before the Lions laid that egg. But Dan Campbell instills a level of passion and heart into this team that cannot be quantified in X's and O's. This team came out with an attitude, a winning attitude. And I know it sounds stupid, but they did. They came out as if they were set to dominate this team, and they played like their hair was on fire. Just everything was running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but it was controlled chaos. It was exactly what they needed to do. And I was so Campbell got them going. So now I know they're a wounded team going into the playoffs, but Dan Campbell with the bye week, he's only got to get 2 weeks of that craziness to get them to the Super Bowl. I was not putting them in my discussion for the Super Bowl, but knowing he could get that out of them, it's going to be really hard for that intangible to not be something I have to think about when I'm analyzing this playoff run for the Lions.
Yeah, the Lions got back Alex Anzalone, who did not play since week 12. That defense looked completely different with Anzalone on the field. I think he's the leader of this defense. I know, Hutchinson, he's not coming back, but I think this Anzalone coming back really bolstered this defense.
He definitely helped. Yeah, he definitely helped. It was that whole idea where the Vikings were caught off guard. Anzalone's a good player. He's good in coverage, not outstanding or crazy. He's decent when blitzing. So, yeah, he is a piece they needed. He was an energetic piece they needed. Yeah. But if they're playing the Eagles and they don't have that emotional edge, then all of a sudden, people back never hurts. They still are ravaged, but I'm with you on that. Now, offensively, they didn't have to do much. Jared Goff did not have a good game. Jared Goff threw a couple of bad interceptions. He had a grounding in the end zone that they pointed out that should have been grounding. The ball was not thrown toward 89. The ball was thrown straight down the middle of the field. There was no receiver. It was a clear grounding. What would have been a safety, but it wouldn't matter because the Vikings had the ball multiple times at the 10-yard line and couldn't score. But let's not forget, Jared Goff got away with one here. Blowout win. He got away with one because if they had played a team that was ready for them, and they would have exposed the Lions defense, they would not have overcome those turnovers.
Yeah, I get Goff didn't have to do much. What about Gibbs here? Because that's what I left last night with Montgomery out. We've seen Gibbs really start ascending into an elite category. Are we at a point where Gibbs is he ever going to take over this backfield? And should he eventually take over this backfield? I get that Montgomery plays his role, but it wasn't just finesse running from Gibbs. He pushed that last touchdown into the end zone.
So as you mentioned, I see Scott made a comment. We've gone right with yours. He says, "Did David Montgomery help or hurt the run game when he returns?" So, and you bring up the point. Here's the deal. When this Lions team was healthy 7-8 weeks ago, this was a team that was set to have a good defense. Their defense was good when they had everybody. It was good. They had a good defense. They had a very balanced offense that was explosive. And what their goal was to get a lead. David Montgomery's the grinder. You grind down the clock. They did that in multiple games where they took away the last 5 minutes. They just took the last 5 minutes, put it on the ground. Montgomery badgered you, and that was over. Montgomery had a clear role. I keep going back to the fact that this defense is still going to have problems in the playoffs. Now, if they get a good matchup with a team in the first round, maybe it won't be so bad. But we've seen it. Teams are going to score 35 points on them. It's going to happen. And in that case, Montgomery is not really a necessary part of that offense because they have to be foot to the metal, score as many points as you can to take care of any contingencies. And in that scenario, they are much better off with Jahmyr Gibbs. And again, we want David Montgomery to be healthy. We love him. But for the playoffs, we want Gibbs would be the one. If you have to win 38-35, 38-31, Gibbs is the one you want on the field. Because like you said, Anthony, you saw it yesterday, the explosiveness. You add that with the passing game, Jamison Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta. All of a sudden, that's what you need to have a turbocharged offense to be able to hang in the games where your defense is not going to have this miraculous game where they don't give up anything after getting torched.
Yeah, I came out, again, impressed with the Lions overall. I feel like they had to find a different way to win because Goff was having a bad game. We got to remember, like, coming into this matchup, there were games where Goff was completing 80-90% of his passes,
right?
And having these monster games. He was playing mistake-free football, and the fact that they still were able to find a way to win with their defense stepping back up after how poorly it's played and running the ball without David Montgomery. This team is very, very dangerous.
There's no doubt. Extremely dangerous team. Now, next we'll look at reaction number 2. We spent a good amount of time on the Vikings and the Lions, so let's move forward a bit. We'll talk about playoffs, things with the Vikings, especially as the week goes on. But reaction number 2. The Buccaneers clinched the number 3 seed. Now, they had little help. The Rams didn't play their starter, still almost won, but the Buccaneers get the 3 seed out of this one. And it'll be interesting because they will play the Washington Commanders. But first of all, the game the Bucs played, and everybody's sick of me talking about it, and I get it. I call it the subliminal switch. And the Buccaneers did not show up for the game. Again, your coaches tell you all week long, the Saints are dangerous. The Saints are dangerous. They're telling them that. But in the back of your mind as a player, you're like, they're the Saints. They got Spencer Rattler. They've lost a lot of their defensive players. So nobody was worried about that. But the Buccaneers had a wake-up moment, and they were in trouble. They were in trouble at halftime. They were in trouble early in the third quarter. And then Baker Mayfield has this weird run where he doesn't slide on time. He slides late, and the defender hits him. It wasn't a bad hit. Baker stayed up too long. But Baker almost got into it with the defender, and then the linemen started getting in there. They moved Baker to the side. They started, getting in the Saints' faces. And I think it was the turning point where something went on and they got that mojo back. And then all of a sudden they boat raced them the rest of the way. All of a sudden Spencer Rattler, who looked like Superman in the first half, couldn't move the ball as we would have expected from quarter one. The offense did just enough. Baker did have a turnover, but Jalen McMillan, a big play. So the Buccaneers, I don't fault them for falling behind the Saints. Again, it's a subliminal switch thing. In the playoffs, that doesn't happen. You usually don't have a team that you don't take seriously. All that said, from an offensive standpoint, Anthony, are the Buccaneers dangerous in the playoffs?
I think so. And I feel like yesterday's game, maybe you overlook the Saints, maybe don't. That was a playoff game. They don't win this game, and they're probably going home, and that's assuming whatever the Falcons did. But I would have treated this like a playoff game. And the fact that it was a 16-6 deficit going into halftime, Baker Mayfield, the rest of this team, they rallied, they climbed out of the deficit, and they blew the game open. This is the type of win, and I get it's against the Saints, but this is the type of win you want going into the playoffs. You get a home game against the Commanders, and let's say they get Philly in round 2. They beat Philly earlier this year. I get it was without Devonta Smith and without A.J. Brown, and they blew the doors off of Philly last year in the playoffs. Baker Mayfield is not scared of Philly. So I'm calling this the most dangerous team nobody's probably talking about.
They're extremely dangerous. Baker Mayfield, say what you want about him, but if you're holding preconceived beliefs about who he was in the former parts of his career, you're making a big mistake. In clutch time, if he has to run for 15 yards, he runs for 15 yards. He might not look good doing it, but he does it. If he has to make a tight window throw, he makes it. Yeah, he makes some mistakes. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Josh Allen. He's not Lamar Jackson. He'll make mistakes, but he makes a lot of big clutch plays. He extends plays. He works perfectly within the design of the offense that Liam Cohen has drawn up for him. A lot of very good screens to the running backs, tight ends, and then you get Mike Evans and now Jalen McMillan above. It's a well-rounded offense, and the pass protection has been outstanding for them all year long. So this is a team that even when they face good pass rushes, they often keep Mayfield clean, and they can run the ball. It's a balanced offense, and if it's in the situation where they're in a shootout, they can hang, and that'll be fun to watch. Now, when we also talk about the Buccaneers, they're going to play the Commanders. Now, they played in week 1, so it doesn't mean a lot, but they did blow them out. It was like 37-20. Jaden Daniels in the second half, when the game was way out of hand, he ran for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, that would be a normal stat line for him in a lot of games. And you can't really say week 1 is predictive of anything. It may not be. But ultimately, the Washington defense is not very good, and they've been exposed more and more as the season's gone on. The Buccaneers should have no problem moving the ball here. Defensively, we know Todd Bowles is going to send the blitz. Now, the whole thing with Jaden Daniels is when you blitz, you want to keep him contained in the pocket. But lately, we've seen Daniels do very well getting slippery from in the pocket when he was being hemmed in and finding space to navigate. Now, there's film out on that. So the whole key to that game for the Buccaneers defense is going to be just making sure you keep him corralled in that pocket. If they can do that, the Buccaneers could win this easily. But if they all of a sudden can't just deal with Daniels, they could be in for a handful. What do you think? Early thoughts on this game?
My early thoughts, well, I was looking at, Tampa's defense, because that's going to be the key. They play the run well. They don't defend the pass well, and I believe their turnover differential is -5, which isn't good. But when I just think about this Washington matchup, Washington, I feel like you run the ball, opens up the pass. If they could stop the Washington run game from getting going, is Jaden Daniels there yet to where if you make this team one-dimensional, he has to throw it, can he win football games that way?
And that's the whole point. Now, the Bucs are all banged up at safety, and I know, unfortunately, Jordan Whitehead was in a car accident, some kind of probably a serious injury. Very concerned for his health. Hopefully, not football related, but hopefully he's okay. And I know that they've been without Antoine Winfield. They really need to get him back because if Winfield's back, that changes the whole face of the secondary because he is one of the blue chip elite players in the league. But like you said, that's what it's going to come down to. We know Todd Bowles going to blitz. Now, you mentioned the run game. Washington has not been a good run team for like a month plus. They are not consistently running the ball. So their odds are they are going to have to win this game through the air if they're going to win it there. And I again, with Baker Mayfield, the way they're humming right now, I really think that they're going to be able to get things going. But we can't leave this segment without talking about Mike Evans. I was so happy the Buccaneers made it a point to get him that 1,000 yards. 11 straight seasons, ties Jerry Rice's record. But Evans is the only one who had done it in his first 11 seasons. Jerry Rice didn't have 1,000 yards as a rookie. He had a rough rookie year. But it was late in the game. They had gotten Evans within 5 yards. And then there was like 2 minutes left, and New Orleans had the ball. New Orleans ends up turning the ball over. Don't remember if it was a punt or a turnover, but the ball went over to the Bucs. There was less than a minute left, and the Buccaneers could have easily taken a knee, take 0 chances. But they called a timeout. And I kind of thought, you've got to get Evans at 5 yards. And they set 3 receivers to the left. They ran 2 of them out at the snap. Evans hung back, and Baker Mayfield threw him a super safe slip screen pass. And then Evans just ran for 9 yards, and he had it. And that ran the clock out. And I got goosebumps just looking at it right now because that was Mike Evans is all that's right about football. And he deserves it. And he had missed games with injury. So it wasn't like he played a 17-game season and they barely got him to 1,000. No, he missed significant time with a hamstring. Thoughts on Mike Evans?
Yeah, you bring up that Jerry Rice didn't do it in 11 straight. You know what else Jerry Rice didn't do? This is what makes it impressive for Mike Evans. And people might remember this or not, Mike Glennon and McCown were Evans' quarterbacks in his first year or two, and he still got to those 1,000 yards. Ryan Fitzpatrick, a journeyman. I mean, he's done it with, I think, 5 or 6 different quarterbacks, what makes it that more impressive.
You're right. I mean, because we're looking at Joe Montana, Steve Young. That's, right. And now Jerry Rice.
A couple of slouches.
Right, we're taking nothing from Jerry Rice. Honestly, I'll never say anything negative about Jerry Rice. In my mind, he is one of the. I mean, him like Deion Sanders. I know people argue with me on that. There's a few of them that are in that tiny, tiny room of the best player ever, and he's right there. So no knock at Jerry Rice, but again, like you said, all the credit to Mike Evans because he has done it without a lot of benefits around him. And so again, just. Very, very excited for Mike Evans. He deserves it. And I hope he has a couple more of these seasons because the longer he stays in football, the better for all of us. Hey, if you enjoy videos like this, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, you can check out all of our fantasy football content and rankings by getting a free 2-day trial with no credit card needed. Head on over to rotowire.com/Jim. Check us out. We got all the sports covered. We got baseball, hockey, basketball, whatever it is you like. We have really got it going on there. So check us out. If you like it, join the team. If not, we're just glad you looked at us and you can move on and keep coming back and watching us here. That's fine too. Anthony, let's get to reaction number 3. The banged up Packers are set to face the Eagles. They lost Christian Watson to an injury. He was carted off the field with a knee injury. Again, I'm not in the house. I haven't seen anything in the news yet. I'm sure it'll come out soon, but I would think the odds of him playing are somewhere near 0. Again, I don't want to be presumptive, but carted off the field and playing the next week are usually not, in line. And here's the thing, Anthony. Christian Watson may not have had a great season, but he's the one player that could stretch the field for them. And that's a problem. Minnesota put game film out on them when they last played, it was last week, and Minnesota's a zone team defensively. They realized against Green Bay, you play man against them because they have no man beaters. They don't have anybody beat man. Christian Watson, again, is the one who could get downfield and beat you on explosive. Romeo Dobbs isn't beating you in man, and Dontavian Wicks isn't, and they don't even use Jaden Reed properly, so that's not Jaden Reed's fault. They just don't use him right. So all that said, if the Eagles come into it, and I know Vic Fangio's their coach, but every team plays man at some point. They dial up man here, and I don't know without Christian Watson. And now Jordan Love seems fine. He was warming up at the end of the game, trying to get back in the game when they had a chance to win. So it seems like his elbow is not an issue, but again, we'll see. But overall, I think the Packers are in real trouble going to Philadelphia.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. My bigger worry with the whole Jordan Love thing is going back a couple Monday Night Footballs ago, and it was against the Saints. And it was a Josh Jacobs dominant game, but when they did throw the ball, Jordan Love didn't look good throwing the football. He couldn't get anything going. Then that continued against the Minnesota Vikings, where that final score was not as close as the ball game. Like Minnesota dominated that game, and now yesterday he suffers an injury. I was hoping, well, maybe the Packers can try to get him into a groove. Then they lose Christian Watson. They're going to run into a Philly buzzsaw. And unless, Josh Jacobs would need to have a career, like a game that he would have in Alabama, I think, to save this game for Green Bay. And I don't think I'm being, I'm making a stretch statement there.
No,
like he would have to have a 200-yard, 3-touchdown game.
And Philly isn't the team that is going to give that up most likely. Philly's been a very good team against the run. They got significantly better as the season went on. And their primary focus is going to be slowing down Jacobs because their corners are, frankly, again, this is not a knock on Jaden Reed. They don't use him properly. But those corners for Philly are way better than the receivers for Green Bay. And that pass rush is for real. And even though Green Bay has a decent offensive line, they get enough pressure. So this is a problematic matchup. So this line, Anthony, started out quickly at 3.5 Eagles. It's already 5.5. I got my 5-leg teaser in right away last night, and that 3.5 minus for the Eagles became a plus 2.5. And I always like those 5-leg teasers. So, but that one, like that right away. But yeah, that said, this is not a good beginning to the postseason for the Packers. There is reason for concern. Like you said, Anthony, they will need that game from Josh Jacobs. Otherwise, it could be a very, very ugly game. And it would not surprise me for a second. And I don't think Packers defensively can push any of the levers that would be needed to slow down this offense because they're not great against the run. And then, like you said, if you sell out to stop that, you got that little issue of A.J. Brown and Devontae, but now Dallas Goedert's healthy. So very problematic. Let's go on to reaction number 4. The Ravens seem set to have their best postseason. But Anthony, I'm a 5% bit nervous about the first game. They're playing the Steelers again. And it wouldn't be a problem. But remember, early in the season, the Steelers won that weird 18-16 game. And then we just saw them a few weeks ago. And the Ravens crushed them. And Derrick Henry, 162 yards on the ground. Lamar didn't have to throw a lot, but 3 touchdown passes. They shredded the Steelers. But here's a couple things I'm worried about. First of all, the fact they did that, the Steelers now have seen that. They've seen that version of the Ravens. And the Steelers are a well-coached team and a very talented defense. If they learn from that game and they come up with a couple of wrinkles to be able to maybe figure out something, they've done well against Lamar Jackson over the years. But if they figure it out because the Ravens showed them that game plan, I'm a little bit nervous. Am I foolish in thinking that?
I don't call you foolish, but I don't think the Ravens are going to be in trouble either because, maybe you slow that offense down, that offense should still be able to score enough points to win. I don't trust anything going on with that Pittsburgh offense right now. So even if they hold Baltimore to 17, I don't know if Pittsburgh can score 14.
And that is where I think the point lies. And one last thing before we go to that other side of the ball, Zay Flowers did suffer a knee injury. It seems right now he probably isn't going to be able to go. Don't know the severity of the injury, but what I saw from Twitter, Ian Rappaport, is that it doesn't seem likely he's going to play. Does that add any stress or problem to the Ravens against the Steelers?
just having that dynamic of Zay Flowers not being there, but Rashad Bateman is also he's having a career year right now. I get he's a different style wide receiver. They have two different jobs, but I don't know if Zay Flowers missing is enough for me to say, you know what, I'm going to give Pittsburgh a little bit more of an edge here. It's
Mark
a factor,
Andrews.
but it's not.
Mark Andrews scored 11 touchdowns this year, and he pretty much was absent the first 3 weeks of the season. Mark Andrews is insane, and he has that great connection with Lamar Jackson. I just wanted to point that out. Anthony and I both had, I believe we both had Mark Andrews our second tight end going into the season.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if you weather those first few weeks, you got what you paid for there because, and you got, again, you should have gotten him as the fourth or fifth tight end off the board. But yeah, Mark Andrews just continues to get it done. What a wonderful player to watch. He's go ahead.
No, go on about Andrews before then I'll finish.
He's just never going to reach his yardage ceiling because they don't have to throw that much. There are so many games when Lamar throws 18 to 24 times, and it's just the targets aren't going to be there for the big yardage. But even so, he can make a big play from there. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say this Ravens defense. I've said it the past few games. It looks like it is getting hot at the right time. They used to, everybody was able to throw on this team. The secondary seems to be, maybe it's made, but the secondary seems to be tightening up. And they've always kind of played the run well this year. They have not given up 20 points in the game since the Chargers in week 12.
Anthony, I was saying on the recent show, in the first half of the season, the Ravens were like a bottom 5 to 7 defense. They were terrible. They were good against the run, but they were giving explosive pass plays right and left. But like you said, right now, look, this NFL season, you change your thinking as the league changes. Right now, the Ravens are a top 10 defense, and I might be overstating that. It might really be like a top 6 defense. They are playing very well. The communication in the secondary is great. I'm not sure what happened to Kyle Hamilton the other day. He did go off the field. He looked like something was hurt. Hopefully he's okay. We'll see how that shakes out, but he would be a critical component. They definitely need him. But like you said, the corners and the zone coverage they use, they're really communicating better. And I think that was the big problem all along. When you don't communicate well in the secondary, big plays happen because you don't pass off coverages and things like that. And I just think they figured that out. Remember, although they lost 3 of their defensive coaches from last year, John Harbaugh runs the team, and he's like that CEO type. And they're always a problem-solving organization. When they realize they have infrastructure problems, they always find solutions to those. And this was a case in point. Early in the season, Anthony, you remember me carrying on and on about week 1. Why are they throwing the ball 20 times to Isaiah Likely, and they're not putting Ricard on the field, and Derrick Henry's doing nothing? And week 3, like I told you, I'm sure Harbaugh got in Monken's ear and said, this team is about Derrick Henry. It's not about Isaiah Likely. And as soon as they did that, all of a sudden the Ravens offense was completely different. But that's my whole point. They're a problem-solving organization, and there may not be a better organization in the league at doing that.
No, and we've seen this year in and year out from the Baltimore Ravens. So this isn't anything new. They could always weather the storm and adjust on the fly. And this defense is getting hot, like I said, at the right time going into the playoffs. And I get Houston's, the offense hasn't been great. A couple weeks ago, week 17, you hold them to 2 points. I mean, this is a team with Nico Collins. This guy isn't a slouch.
Hey, and I'm going to argue with you. They didn't hold them to 2 points. Derrick Henry gave them 2 points. Their defense didn't give them. And I always laugh about that. You were right. And I'm not arguing with you. But it was like, no, their defense didn't give a single flipping point. What was Derrick Henry run sideways for? You don't do that, big dog. We know you better than that. Run sideways and bad things happen. Anyway, let's finish up on the Ravens. Can the Ravens get through the AFC?
I think I'm always going to back Kansas City, but my concern with Kansas City this year, I don't like this 2-3 week gap of not playing. That is sticking in my mind a lot. And Baltimore, they brought Derrick Henry in to beat Kansas City. And if they're using him correctly, I think he's going to be the difference maker if these two teams play. So I give Baltimore a better chance this year than I will have ever given them to get through Kansas City and finally get to a championship, because it's not just Derrick Henry. This is the best version of Lamar Jackson. I feel like I say this every year of him throwing the football. This guy just keeps getting better.
The Ravens couldn't be positioned better. Defense is playing well. Not the defense it was last year, and that's okay. But like you said, that element of the offense of Derrick Henry, it changes things. And I tell you what, my guess is
Justice Hill.
Right? Oh my gosh, that love affair that John Harbaugh has with Justice Hill, I just never really understood it. And I know he makes a big play here and there or whatever, but yeah, not so much ever sold on him. Now, as we're thinking about the Ravens, I'm going to say this. I bet you in the back of their mind, they are praying for games when they go to Buffalo, maybe Kansas City, where it's 5 degrees out, 2 inches of snow. Because if they play in a real sloppy game, wouldn't you love having Derrick Henry in one of those games and Lamar Jackson? Wouldn't it be just great having them in that type of sloppy game?
Yeah, especially with the way they play.
Right. And think about it. Buffalo, we know Buffalo weather can be nasty. And if they go to Kansas City, it's not the worst weather venue, but they've had their share of snow and cold. And this team is really, really built for the elements, maybe better than any other team I've seen in a while. And not to discount somebody who is, but the way they're built, it really seems like a team that would be perfectly set for that. Before we get to reaction number 5, though, I do want to take a minute since you mentioned the Chiefs, and we do need to talk about they didn't really play this week. None of their players played. The team played, but obviously nobody showed up. And here's the thing. You mentioned the rest with the Chiefs. I'm not worried about it. They've won multiple Super Bowls. They have veteran leadership, and their first round game is not going to be against the Ravens, or their first game won't be against the Ravens or Bills. It'll probably be against the winner of the 4-5 game, which is going to be the Chargers and the Texans. So I think that even if the Chiefs don't show up for the first quarter of that game, of whoever they play, and any team can win it any Sunday, I get that. But I think that if they have a little rust for one quarter, I think ultimately that won't matter. The bigger point the Chiefs, Anthony, is this. Marquise Brown has been back for 2 weeks, and we already saw the offense was already more explosive. They lit up Pittsburgh on Christmas, lit them up. It changes. We talked about the preseason. We loved Mahomes.
Yes.
Because of the combination of Brown and Worthy. When it was just Worthy, we weren't excited. But the combination of them. Now Worthy can work his speed underneath and stretch the defense horizontally more, whereas Brown, even though he doesn't always run on deep routes, they run him to the second and third level, but the ability for him, defenses know what he could do after the catch. They've got to treat it like it's a true downfield. And we've seen now, all of a sudden, more room for Travis Kelce. Then there will be more room for the running game. How is somebody going to defend this team? And DJ Humphries was apparently healthy enough yesterday, so he'll be back in the saddle, and then they'll be able to move Tooney back to the interior, because remember, you got to run the ball in January. Isaiah Pacheco, I don't know if he's going to be 100%, but he's been back a while now. He hasn't looked great, but you would think 3 more weeks, that leg's got to be really close to being able to run full speed, and that one's a projection. But on the other side, Anthony, Jalen Watson, he had broke his fibula in middle of the season, early October, and they got him back yesterday. I don't know if he played, but he's cleared to play, and now he's got a couple more weeks. When Jalen Watson went out at the cornerback room, everybody else kind of had to move to spots, and then all of a sudden they couldn't stop passing him. Jalen Watson's a good corner. It allows McDuffie to do his job without having to do more. All of a sudden, Spagnuolo is now opened up to do more. Charles Omena, who has been working his way back from an ACL, been on the roster, he's getting healthier by the week. And all of a sudden, you start looking at this thing, and you're like, man, the stars have aligned. They've got exactly what they want on offense. They've got pretty much what they want on defense. What are your thoughts about the Chiefs as they enter the postseason?
Again, that extra week of rest, I don't love it. I don't think it's going to affect them that much. They need to be able to run the football. I think you hit the nail on the head. A healthier version of Isaiah Pacheco should be fine to do that. But when it's all said and done, I feel like just Kansas City, they find ways to win. They find ways. Obviously, the back end of the defense gets the boost from Watson. Mahomes is throwing the football. Like I haven't seen Mahomes throw a football like this in 2 years. So even if they can't run, I do think they have enough horses in the stable to go outscore you if they need to.
And Andy Reid will have had about 3 weeks to come up with some new twists on offense that nobody's seen with those players. Do you realize, I think it's been like 11 touches in the last 3 meaningful games for Xavier Worthy. They've gotten him involved in a much, much different way. I cannot wait to see the playoffs. And I know everybody is sick of seeing the Chiefs get all, I get it. I get it. And whatever it is, though, again, I live in Chicago. I saw every home playoff game. I was at every home playoff game Michael Jordan ever played, and I didn't get sick of winning. Didn't get sick of it at all. So I understand to be on that side, but I understand the other side that if you're a fan of another team, you're like, give somebody else a chance. So I get all that. All right, let's do reaction number 5, Anthony. That'll be the Broncos clinch the number 7 seed, and they will face the Buffalo Bills. Not much to say about the Broncos here, but I will. Let's say one thing. Obviously, they played the Chiefs. The Chiefs had nobody out there. The Broncos dominated from second one to the last minute of the game. It was never a contest, and nothing to take away from that game. But Marvin Mims has quietly been a massive playmaker for them for a month, and that has flown under the radar. He is producing at a high level. They're using him in the downfield passing game. When they use him in the running game, they rarely ever get anything out of it. But Marvin Mims has been just eating. And I think potentially he changes the whole face of that offense, because with him and the speed he brings, that's something defense have to respect. Courtland Sutton is a great player. He's your classic X receiver. But now you got Mims in here, 200-yard games in the last 5. He's got a 50 and a 60 in there. He's got two touchdown games in a row. He has just been fabulous for them in that role. Just thoughts on Marvin Mims before we get to the overall Broncos.
You know, a lot of us have been waiting for this Marvin Mims breakout. It's happening. I like how versatile he is. It's almost like he is their version of Xavier Worthy, with how with the speed and all the different things you can do with him offensively. And I think his emergence is really opening up this Denver offense, because they needed another dude. It couldn't have just been Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton and then somebody steps up. They needed a more consistent piece, and I think Mims is that other piece that could potentially get them. I don't think they're going to win a playoff game, but I think he gives them a better shot with his versatility.
There's no doubt the running game is a problem. And look, I get it. Jaleel McLaughlin is nice. I still contend that when defenses see McLaughlin on the field, they've been trained to think they're going to pass, and he has room to run. When Javonte or is on the field or Estime, defenses are playing the run, and they really often get hit at or behind the line of scrimmage. McLaughlin, never gets hit behind, rarely gets hit behind the line of scrimmage, because teams aren't playing the run when they're in. They see him as a passing down back. I think when playoff film gets studied, the Bills are going to see, they're using him as a runner, not as a receiver. And so I think they treat McLaughlin a lot differently than other teams had. And I think that's something that, Anthony, I talk about this all the time, the difference in regular season versus postseason game planning. We talked for years about how Bill Belichick would, always have the answers during the regular season. He was like one of the only coaches, and this is how stunning is this? One of the only coaches who was hyper specific with a weekly game plan in the regular season. Most coaches just don't do that. They make some variations, some tweaks, but they don't go all out to stop a team. And that always has confounded me. How do you not do that when your job is coaching an NFL team?
No, I agree, but that also is why Bill Belichick is in his own tier. I think it separates the good from the great.
And it sounds so basic to me. How do you not, over prepare for your opponent, know what their flaws are? There's film out on everybody. You could hire as many people as you want to grind the film for you. It never makes sense to me. But my whole point is this: in the NFL playoffs, not all coaches do it to the same level, obviously, but you see a completely different level of game planning. I remember I was in somebody's fantasy football postseason contest in the past, and the first week, way back in the way, I remember Kansas City had Larry Johnson. He had this massive, massive season, right? And then they had a first-round playoff game, I think against maybe Indy or somebody who didn't have a good run defense. So everybody put Larry Johnson in there. Well, Larry Johnson got stoned. What happened? I mean stoned like stuffed. Well, what happened? It was a playoff football. Yeah. And Indy came in and they literally overloaded the box. They said, beat us with the pass. And they were willing to take their chances there. So in the playoffs, often teams will force you to play left-handed. And that is the beauty of playoff football. And that's something that we can't quantify when we're going, and we don't know which coaches are going to be able to do it and do it successfully, because it doesn't always work when you try it. That leads us to the playoff game, though, Anthony. Broncos play the Bills. Now, in terms of this matchup, Sean Payton's an excellent coach. And I honestly believe he can outcoach the Buffalo staff. I just don't know if they have the horse to do it. But here's my biggest question. The Buffalo defense. They're not a great defense, but they're very good against smaller offenses, limited offenses. But if they play the big boys, they really don't. Patrick Surtain's obviously Superman. But other than that, we saw in Riley Moss. T. Higgins, good luck. When he has to face a really good receiver, no chance. A good rushing attack. If you were in a power running attack, you can get to them because they're small up front. But Buffalo doesn't have a power rushing attack. They don't even really have a superstar receiver. I think Amari Cooper is, but they don't use him. So I guess that's my roundabout way of saying, can the Broncos come into this with Sean Payton coming up with a game plan? And can they make it miserable for the Bills?
I think the stars would have to align perfectly. Is Denver's defense that good to where, the any given Sunday factor comes in? The answer is yes. But what you had said, when this Denver defense played the really good offenses, they were also lit up.
Mm-hmm.
And that Baltimore game is the one that really sticks out.
And it was Derrick Henry running. They can't handle a big back. That's the first thing. When they play a physical rushing attack, they can't handle it. I know the offensive line of Buffalo is good, but this rushing attack is not like the big boy rushing attack. And, Josh Allen's obviously, an immense talent, elite player, but we got Khalil Shakir, we got Keon Coleman. Ultimately, can the Broncos handle that?
Yes, but I'm not picking. But I wouldn't pick them.
I think I'm taking the points. Okay,
that's fair. I think I meant straight up. Straight up, I can't see myself picking Denver to win this game straight up on the road.
You're right. And nobody would pick them. But again, we've seen it though. We know in the playoffs there is going to be an upset. It's not the chalk isn't walking through. We already know that. And the upset's got to come somewhere. And like you said, I'm not going to be foolish to go on the mountaintop and scream, the Broncos are beating the Bills. I want the Bills to win. I want to see a Bills-Ravens matchup in that second. I want that game. I mean, that's on my wish list for the postseason, because that's one that's going to be must-see watch. But I would say there's a 15% chance the Broncos pull this off. Otherwise, all that said, Anthony, how much of a chance do the Bills have of advancing all the way through and making it to the Super Bowl?
I think the Bills have a very good chance. My biggest worry about the Bills, as you said, the lack of a power running game. I think that's why I give a team like the Ravens the edge over the Buffalo Bills, is because when it's all said and done, they can go give it to Derrick Henry 30 times. There's not one running back on that Bills roster that I would trust giving a ball to 30 times. Unless it's even Josh Allen, and he's not a running back.
Right? Hey, you and I would give it to Ray Davis, but they don't see things the same way. Nice to see Ray Davis get in the end zone yesterday. All right, everybody, we'll have a lot coming at you with RotoWire throughout the NFL playoffs. Make sure you stick with us. I know on this channel we'll have a Wednesday show, and we'll be going through the exact previews of all 6 playoff games. Anthony and I will have multiple streams. We will do – so this is going to kind of be the rough plan. Saturday there's 2 games. Saturday night, we will recap the Saturday games. And then what we'll do is, instead of Sunday, there's 2 games Sunday. We'll come back Monday morning and recap the 2 Sunday games. And then the Monday night game, which is a playoff game, that'll be the Rams game. We'll come back on Tuesday morning. So we'll have multiple streams. We'll do reaction shows to all the playoff days of football. The only one that'll be the same day as Saturday. Anthony, any words about the playoffs?
No, really excited for the playoffs this year. Obviously, Kansas City looks to be the favorite, but you can make cases for the Bills, the Ravens, the Lions. Again, and I think the sleeper team is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So really excited for the postseason this year.
You led me to one more comment. Sorry, but you thought you were off the hook, but you're staying here, so we're happy you're here. So thank you. But here's the point: the AFC is all about the quarterbacks. You got Mahomes, you got Allen, you got Jackson in any order. I'm not saying one's, one's this or that, but you've got the quarterbacks there. And in the NFC, you've got the teams. And it's so interesting how different they are. Yeah, you got Jalen Hurts, he's good, and Baker Mayfield, he's good. And then you got Jared Goff. But you got one conference with the elite quarterbacks. Yeah. Justin Herbert. Throw Justin Herbert in there, right?
Yeah.
And in the NFC, you don't have the quarterbacks considered in that breath. Isn't that odd how that stacked up?
Yeah, and I didn't really think about it that way, but you're 100% right that the AFC has that edge, really elite quarterback play. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm not discounting Jared Goff, but if Jared Goff, who might be a top 3 quarterback or better in the NFC, in the AFC, I don't know if he's cracking the top 5, top 6.
Going into the season, there were a great number of analysts who said Matthew Stafford going into the year was the best quarterback in the NFC. And I don't know that at that point it was a hard argument. Jalen Hurts has mega limitations. Brock Purdy, when you went through the list, it was defensible at least. But in the AFC, Matthew Stafford, where would he top out? 5, 6, 7? Yeah. And again, that's the whole point. Hey, everybody, we appreciate you greatly. We hope that you been having a great holiday season as it comes to a close here. But again, there is no better season than the NFL playoff season. And we got you covered at RotoWire. If you want a free trial, all the sports, we've got you. You go to rotowire.com/Jim. Check us out. Remember, keep checking us on the social media. And if you're not subscribed to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Only YouTube channel, Anthony and I and Joe Bartle and others, we will be all off season. We'll be on that channel, not the main RotoWire YouTube channel where we have a lot of great content, but the football will all be on RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube. Have a great day, everybody, and we will catch you soon.